Well, I'm Allie from O2X, and I have the fun job of being able to work with specialists around the country who are experts in their own right in all different fields. And I'm excited to be here today, kind of across the screen from three of our O2X specialists. We've got Rachele Pojednic, who is a nutrition specialist, Bruce Stockton, who is one of our injury prevention and strength and conditioning specialists, and then Pete Kadushin, who is a mental performance specialist for us. So figured we'd just kind of kick it off, and each of you can kind of introduce yourselves and how you got into what you're doing and where you are these days. So Rachele, do you want to kick it off for
sure.
us?
I'm Rachele Pojednic. I'm a professor over at Simmons University in the nutrition department, and I also have a background in exercise physiology. So my PhD, when I did the work, was on nutritional biochemistry and skeletal muscle. So I really investigate, both in the courses that I teach as well as the research that I do, how nutrition and exercise work together for performance as well as non-communicable disease treatment and prevention. Things like type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease.
Cool. How about you, Bruce?
So my name is Bruce Stockton. I'm a physical therapist and strength conditioning coach. I'm currently down here in Raleigh, North Carolina, but I'm a Boston guy. I just graduated from Boston University from my PT last year. So heart's still in Boston with all you guys. I got my start playing rugby in college, which naturally got me into strength, but also into the PT room quite a bit from an injury standpoint. And from there, just got really interested in how do we kind of blend those two things. You know, a lot of physical therapists aren't really the best at loading a lot of our athletes that need that more heavy experience. And a lot of our strength coaches oftentimes could do a little better to work more on the injury resilience side of things as well. So I wanted to kind of get in the middle of that spectrum and work with, our tactical athletes. I myself am a weightlifter. That's my background. So CrossFit and any strength athletes are definitely my passion. And that's where I try and get most of my treatment to lie is, in that middle of rehab and performance.
Cool. Great. How about you, Pete?
Hi, everyone. Pete Kadushin. I'm a mental performance coach, and I also teach at Boston University in a master's program that focuses on counseling and then also on sport and performance psychology. And I got my start because I was an athlete and I have a passion for excellence and mastery. And I was also a head case. And so trying to figure out how to fix my own performance really led me into the realm of understanding how to build mental skills and mindset that allow you to perform close to your physical best as consistently as possible. And now I get to share what I'm using for myself with folks that I either teach with or work with.
Cool. This is great. We have kind of almost all angles of performance. So I think what I hear from all of you is you all have different backgrounds that got you to where you are, but within that, you probably had to build these habits yourselves. So how do you each kind of look at building healthy habits and building new routines into your lives that presumably got you where you are? But what does that look like for you all?
Who wants this one first?
Go for it, Pete.
I'll do it. One of the things I think a lot about now when it comes to habits is understanding the influence the environment has. Specifically, what's your house look like, or your living situation? What's work look like? Because for a long time, trying to push new habits through, but having an environment that's not conducive to those habits, felt like I was just spinning my wheels. And then same thing with the clients I work with. And so one of the things that I really try and focus on now is how to design an environment that's going to make it most likely for those habits to take hold. I guess an example would be, it changing some of the food that I eat. Simply not having some food in the house makes it a lot harder to eat that food, right? So I have a sweet tooth. Not having candy around makes it really easy for me not to eat candy.
I call that setting future Rachele up for success.
That's right. That's right.
That's good.
I think from a habit standpoint, one of the things that I try and work with, both for myself and with anyone I work with, is trying to figure out what's the smallest thing that I can tweak that's going to make the biggest change. We're trying to basically get a snowball effect going. So I'm not going to throw a million things at a patient or a client on day one. I'm going to kind of figure out, all right, if I can get you to do one or two things consistently, how manageable is that for you? If you think that's something you can do on a weekly basis, then cool. Let's make that your main focus for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Once you got that down and it's a very natural, easy part of your routine, then we can try and see where the next step is. But oftentimes it's kind of getting out of your own way, getting out of your own head, like Pete mentioned, and giving yourself the ability to, have a very manageable, bite off something you can chew instead of trying to have the whole meal at once.
Yeah, seeing as you just teed me up there perfectly for nutrition, I'll take it from there. I think the thing when we think about changing your diet is everybody really wants to go all in and change everything at the same time. So you think about some of the more extreme diets that are out there, they'll work when you think about, the popular ones today are, keto or paleo or going vegan or whatever. Those things are certainly sustainable, but only for a really small portion of the population because they're so strict and you have to literally change your life sort of wholesale in order to do those kinds of things. Where when we look at the data and we look at, be it performance, be it disease prevention or treatment, those tiny changes are actually the things that matter the most. So when you think about things like taking out added sugar or adding fruits and vegetables in, little minor details that everybody's like, oh, like that's boring, we don't really want to do that. Those things are actually the things that matter. And so how do we get that? It's literally tiny stepwise progression, one thing at a time in order for you to do the thing that you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. We eat at least 3 times a day. And if you do something that is just wholesale changing everything that you're doing, it's not going to be sustainable. So one of the things that I always tell people is make these changes, one thing at a time, being sure that it's something that you can change for the rest of your life, because that's how long it takes to stick.
Yeah, that's something. Go for it, Pete. Yeah.
I was going to jump in and add one more tactical tip to what has already been shared. I think that instead of trying to redesign your whole life, right, and then starting small and growing from there, another way that you can set yourself up for success is to recognize that you already have a rhythm to your day. And so rather than trying to break that whole rhythm, you can actually sneak new habits in with old habits. So there's a bunch of stuff that you reliably do, hopefully, right? Like brushing your teeth twice a day, eating 3 times a day. And so if you're trying to add something new in, right, attaching it to something that already exists, right? So doing your 2 minutes of breathing before you sit down to have your breakfast or your lunch or your dinner. And that way you're not going, you know what, I'm gonna focus on my relaxation at some point today. But you have a already set up moment that's going to then give you that opportunity to remind yourself, oh, I was going to, do my recovery exercises or my breathing or whatever else you might be trying to start, and already have that ready for you.
Yeah, that actually goes right into the question I was going to ask, Pete. I think one thing that I wonder, and I've heard you talk about a little bit too, is this idea of like posing a question rather than a directive of behavior change. So it's like if you're next to the stairs and there's an elevator, the question of, did you think about taking the stairs rather than taking the elevator? And this in particular, I think for Bruce, I think, how do you think about implementing, especially with tactical athletes, with first responders, that like injury prevention piece? I think a lot of times we focus on eating healthy and then getting workouts in, but we tend to, it's easy to kind of forget the injury prevention side. So how do you build those types of habits, or talk to the tactical populations about where in their routines they can start to build those habits in?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a challenge when, if you're talking about someone who does shift work, for example, or on 24s, they're not going to have a time in that 24-hour shift where if they're trying to squeeze workout in there, then trying to hammer a warm up, cool down in that part of their day, of their week, isn't really where I want to go. But if there's somebody who, okay, after 24, sleep schedule probably isn't on point, we have more downtime, that's the day when I would push them towards, let's try, use that prepare, use that recover, not only as a way to kind of build the habit into the routine and get you more comfortable with it, but also to address some of that we have probably fatigued from a mental standpoint from that poor sleep from the previous 24 hours. Let's kind of down regulate the system to make you more comfortable. And then oftentimes that'll be a window where they say, oh, you know what, after that, I felt a lot better. I felt a lot more calm, but also my body felt a lot better. And then maybe on that workout, the day after they worked at 24, they felt better on that workout than they expected because they did a little prepare, right? So we're kind of trying to use this as get our foot in the door and then get someone to see the benefit. Because oftentimes if you're someone who's like, oh, I don't do yoga, that's for moms. I don't need that kind of thing. Then you realize, oh, I actually felt pretty good after 10 minutes of the yoga prep sort of thing. So figuring out a way that it's going to help benefit the person and get them to realize on their own the benefits that it might have when they might otherwise have been not open to the idea.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. From that same perspective, Rachel, for the nutrition piece, especially on this recovery side of things, are there certain things that people can add into their nutrition in the same way that Bruce is talking, like on days versus off days, and for that recovery and feeling better? Are there ways you would look at kind of structuring days based on schedule there?
Yeah, I think that it's piggybacks just really perfectly there, is that there are days that you're going to be able to control and there are days that you're not going to be able to control. And so on the days that you have control, do the best that you can. And one of the things that I tell people is, if we do eat 3 times a day, and you can control one of those meals, you've controlled a third of the food that you've eaten that day. So it actually is a big deal. So when we think about how those, smaller changes that can be incorporated when you can, that's the most important part. When you think about being on shift, and we just did a really great Q&A on the O2 Instagram, and somebody asked about this, what do I do when I really have no control over your schedule? And the sort of unsexy answer is the best that you can, right? You do the best that you can. You set your future self up for success. So pack a cooler or, have things around that you can have. So if you are out on a job, making sure that you've got that sort of higher calorie, maybe even a little bit more sugar, something like Gatorade, so that when you're sweating, you can replete. When you're, working physically for hours on end, you can replete with the right foods. And then on the days that you are off, the following days, those recovery days, really setting yourself up so that I am going to eat 3 times today. I'm going to make sure that I get the right nutrients. I'm going to make sure that I do the best that I can to get the fruits and vegetables in, that I get the high protein quality foods in. And then on the days when you are on the job, you're literally doing the best that you can to cope with a changing situation at every moment. And so setting yourself up for success there means being a little bit prepared, but also knowing that it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be really pretty, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think, Pete, that kind of leads me to you, which is the mental performance side of all of this. What are kind of that idea of controlling the controllables and managing all of these different things that are grabbing your attention? What are some strategies that you think are particularly helpful as people are trying to put in new routines and these unpredictable, uncertain situations? What are some things you might share with people?
I think that we've already got the foundation established. Everybody's been really great at signaling the unsexy but important secrets to making this work. And I think that really what we've been speaking to is the fact that willpower is a finite battery that needs to be recharged. And so I can't just assume that I can gut it out over my 24-hour shift and that I'm going to choose the celery and carrots over the candy bar. So thinking about the small changes that I'm willing to make over a long period of time, and then also respecting the fact that you don't always have control over your schedule, and you don't always have control over the food that you have access to. You don't always have control over being able to get a workout in, even if you wanted to. And so then planning ahead so that you don't have to spend your willpower in the moment, that you've already set your future self up for success, I think end up being, again, it doesn't sound great. Like, there aren't a whole lot of action heroes that set themselves up for success in the future, and right, they're always gutting it out.
What about celery, man? No, I'm kidding.
That's fair. And
it's
so
a
some
new
of this
Avengers series that they're doing.
That's right. All the vegetables are coming for you. And so I think that respecting the fact that nobody's perfect when it comes to habits, and that it's really about doing the best you can given the situation and being honest with yourself about what is reality right now, and where can I get a little bit better, not where can I be perfect, because perfect always happens tomorrow or the day after that. And then meanwhile, we're like living our real lives, trying to do the best we can with what we've got.
Yeah, I love that quote that's like, don't let perfect get in the way of good.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think it's so important with this. I think I'd just like to follow up on that a little bit as well. And please forgive me if you hear my dogs barking in the background. They are excited. But the thing that I would like to follow up on that with is, especially from a food perspective, what you're going to be looking at, and we talk about this a lot in the trainings, what you're going to be looking at taking in is going to look very different on days where you are sweating and working a job and you're out for hours on end, than it is when you are home and you are recovering. So I think about it from an athletic standpoint is I'm a cyclist. So when we go out on 2, 3, 4, 5 hour rides, I am a sugar nut because that is what I need in order to keep my legs pedaling. If I don't have sugar on board, things like goos, things like bars, things like those little chews that you have, your body literally stops working. And so you need to make sure that you've got the right nutrients on board one way or the other. So if a day when you're out and you're sweating and you're, running up and down stairs and you've got all of your gear on, that might look like a Snickers bar rather than the celery and carrots, because the celery and carrots are not going to give you what you need in that moment. So being cognizant that, yeah, it is going to look different day to day and situation to situation, and being flexible within that is really important as well.
I think something that's important kind of to tie all this in is it's important to control the controllables, right? And to be accountable to yourself. But at the same time, there are going to be times when you don't have that option, right? So to be honest and okay with yourself that everything nowadays is, like we said, sexy. It's Instagram, right? Everything we see on Instagram is that person's life is perfect, right? And I don't know about you guys, but I work out in, and Rachel always eats flawless meals 24/7. Like when shit happens and it doesn't work out that way, being okay with yourself to say, you know what, this is fine, right? If I go into a gym and I have a workout plan, it's going to be like crush me and I'm just not feeling it, the body's not going to have it. Respect that and be okay with that. It's 80-20. As long as you're good 80% of the time, being able to allow yourself those 20% of days, whether it's a physical or mental need for yourself, I think is really important. And a lot of times we miss that, especially modern day.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I think of like when athletes, have a rough game or choke or something, and they get stuck in just the old mistake that they can't move past something, and it's just you got to make productive failures and move on and learn from the mistake that you made and move on from that 20 to get to your 80. One of our specialists, I think, what she said in one of her nutrition talks was never have never have 2 bad meals in a row, which I thought was pretty cool, because when you think about that, you're like, okay, I can manage. If I have like something pizza night one night, then I won't wake up and have just a trash breakfast. I'll make it healthy. And then you just kind of get in those cycles, which I thought was tangible advice. But I think so each of you has your kind of lane of expertise. You obviously have different interests outside of that. But what I'm curious about from everyone's perspective is why you chose that particular piece of human performance. Because I think we all are of the mindset that, whether it's sleep or nutrition or injury prevention or mental performance, they're all really important. But for you, why the focus on, like, Rachel, why did you choose nutrition to focus on in terms of human performance? And then we can go through everyone, but curious to hear.
Yeah. So I actually kind of think nutrition chose me. I started out in exercise. So my whole background, I've got a couple of early degrees in exercise physiology and in education from BU from a performance perspective. I think we probably all sort of circled in that program, which is pretty cool. But I kind of got to the point where I realized that there's more than just the sort of muscle and just sort of the tissue component of it, where my brain was kind of deep science. and realized that in order to make these things happen, like just straight up muscle contraction, you need to have all of these other components. And so it was just a really logical next step. And then it kind of became the whole focus of what I do now, where the exercise and the muscle came a little bit more secondary and the fueling became a little bit more primary. But, you know, I think when you look at a lot of our trajectories of how we got involved in these professions, it's pretty kind of like all over the place, right? So one thing generally leads to the next, which leads to the next. And I don't know about all of you guys, I'm going to speak for myself, is that I tend to get bored a little bit easy. So I'm always looking for sort of the next thing that's really exciting. And nutrition is endlessly crazy and exciting. Even though the general recommendations have stayed at pretty much exactly the same for the last 50 years or so. Eat your fruits and vegetables, kids. But you know, there's always just sort of something new to learn, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, I think it was just kind of like the next logical progression in the step of performance that I was working in.
Cool.
So I think for me, growing up, I was a very average youth athlete, like ran cross country, I swam, and in college, I wanted something a little more physical, right? So I joined rugby. I was a super lanky, skinny kid and did not fit in the rugby field whatsoever. And it was just one of those things where everyone else's bodies just seemed to work the way they wanted them to, right? And they were all had this skill, this coordination, and I just didn't have that. So naturally, like, went to the gym like any kid does and just like started lifting things because that's what you do, right? And just bench and curl, and that's what's going to get you really good at things. So over the time, it was just, I had a lot of keep running the wall over after wall, and I would figure out one thing and something else would come up, and I would constantly go read more and try and find experts. So that's what got me into strength conditioning in the first place. And then, like I said, with rugby, had some injuries that kind of forced me to be like, okay, I need to have a deeper understanding of all these things. I'm self-admittedly a super nerd about all that kind of stuff, performance. So it's like, well, what's the next step? Well, PT school. So went to PT school and constantly tried to figure out all these things with myself, but also I'd had friends that had injuries and I'd be like super interested, like, oh, what can we do? Why could that be? So just a lot of curiosity, both to myself, very selfishly, admittedly, got me into it. But then also figuring out that other people also had these same things going on. And because I had all this experience of seeing things from different angles and considering different things, found I was pretty open-minded as far as being able to bring solutions to the table for other people too. So
Just a pitch for that. When Bruce and I first met at a workshop, right before I was getting ready to present, he had me on the ground working on some internal, external hip rotation stuff so that I could run pain-free, right? So like immediately, oh, you're into running? Let's see how we can help out. By the way, that helped. I really do appreciate it.
awesome. Glad to hear it.
For myself, I'm biased because I think that everything gets filtered through what's going on between our ears. And so it's never to discount what's going on physically. In fact, I think, you know, we've got 4 nerds, and I say that respectfully. We've got 4 nerds here, and I love getting a chance to learn more about nutrition and learn more about injury prevention and strength building. And how we think about things ends up influencing all aspects of our lives. And so really trying to understand the nature of mind and how that can facilitate the opportunity to be happier and healthier and operate at a higher level was something that I got hooked with pretty early on. And then I just recognized that it doesn't matter if you're trying to communicate more clearly with your coworkers, if you're trying to have a great day with your family and your kids and your spouse or whatever it might be, that how we think and how we're engaging, how we feel about reality ends up making all the difference. And so the opportunity to work with tactical and traditional athletes was always really exciting. And the not so secret was that it's an opportunity to help people be happier human beings at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's an end goal for most of us, which is pretty cool. Is like, how do we help people live better lives and get the most out of what they're doing? Before we wrap up, do you guys have any questions for each other?
putting us on the spot there,
I
Allie.
know. It's okay if not.
I have a question. I guess this I could pose to both is one of the ways I think that is really cool about the way that O2X works is that they bring in all these amazing experts. And we all, I feel like, we do have our own areas of expertise, but I feel like this thread of the 1%, what is the sort of one thing that we can do? So I am going to pose it to you guys is what's your 1%?
Way to be speaking the language. I appreciate that.
I'm a company girl.
My 1% right now is really trying to double down on some of the mindfulness work that I've been doing. And so I had been meditating and I'm trying to deepen that just like a little bit rather than trying to go for like the whole thing all at once. Because I think if I can sharpen my sword, I can be more effective with everybody that I then connect with, whether it's students, clients, tactical athletes. So that's been the big one for me over the last couple of months.
So I would say more recently, my 1% has been the eat factor. Yeah, there you go. Shout out. So especially given the current situation, a lot of us are staying at home. So I use it as an opportunity to, one, read a lot more, and two, I kind of redesigned my entire eating program, set some new goals for myself, and just trying to be very diligent about that to give myself some structure. Usually pretty good as far as I had a very, I'll say I was loose. I didn't track everything, but also it was very regimented as far as I would go to the gym and I would kind of eat this type of meal at each times of day. And now that a lot of our schedules have been a little bit thrown off, shall we say, to say the least, just trying to give myself some structure and an opportunity to get better in that realm.
I like it. I'm going to cover Bruce's lane because my 1%, I am notoriously horrible about prepare and recover. So I'm trying to take the extra time to get my dynamic warm-ups in and actually foam roll instead of looking at the foam roller and like thinking how painful it's going to be. So that's my 1% is actually doing that. Yeah, this is awesome. I feel like I could just keep peppering you guys with questions like all day long. Do you have anything that you wish that you kind of always leave a workshop or leave a session being like, oh man, I hope that they got X, Y, or Z out of that, or kind of a lesson learned that you want to leave people with that you hope they take away from your subject or just performance or life in general?
My big takeaway that I always try and get across to everybody is that your body, from a physical standpoint and mental too, I'll let Pete get into that one, is just a super resilient, adaptable machine, right? Whatever you throw at it, as long as you give it the time to adapt and get used to whatever you're doing, whether it's a new training program or a new style of training, right? It'll adapt and it'll work for you as long as you give it the proper tools for success, from managing the eat side of things and then managing your own recovery side of things. So a lot of times I feel like people get the sense that, oh, we have bad this or beat up that or worn up this. And it can be very disheartening, right? When someone tells you, oh, that's it. So just to get across to people that your body can adapt no matter how far down the road you are, no matter what kind of ways you beat yourself up from a professional or a sports standpoint, always room to grow and improve.
I'd like to piggyback right off of that. The thing that I'd always want folks to walk away from my session with is understanding that you have choice. And I think that really builds into what Bruce is suggesting, is that the way it has been doesn't need to be the way that it is moving forward. And all too often we get caught up in the things that we can't control and don't recognize the things, whether it's environmental change or my behavior change, that I can control. And so, we talk about controlling your activation, controlling your attention, and effective thinking. Right? If you can make 1% change in just one of those spots, right, and choose something different, right, like that can have a highest point of leverage effect that really ripples out into other aspects of your life. And so recognizing that even when you feel low capacity, right, because we're all going to feel low capacity at some point, the battery is going to be pretty drained, that you still have some choice, and that's a really empowering opportunity for folks.
Yeah, and I think I'm just going to piggyback right on that, is that one of the things that I always like to get people to understand with diet and nutrition is that despite all of the crazy hype, it's really not that complicated. And that the backbone of any good diet is going to be fruits, vegetables, some variation of high fiber grains. And then after that, it's your choice, what works for your body, you know, and everybody's going to have a slightly different relationship with food, what you like, what you don't like, what nourishes you, what you feel really revs you up, what gets you going. And that is really going to be person to person to person. And you've got to experiment a little bit with that before you figure out long-term what works. But if you keep that backbone, fruits, vegetables, some kind of high fiber grains, and then add onto it meat or not, dairy or not, high fat, low fat, whatever it's going to work for your body, figuring that out for yourself and using that choice day to day to sort of decide, I'm not going to go with the hype. I'm going to go with what makes my body feel good and feel right. You're doing it right. Like you are 100% without a doubt doing it right. And you don't need to sort of succumb to that hype every time there's a new headline, because we're not done yet. Like there's going to be headlines about food till the day we die. So figure out the thing that works for you with that backbone, and you're nailing it.
Cool. I like it. Well, thank you guys for taking the time to chat. And I'll leave everyone with the question of what's your 1%, so we can go out and get a little bit better tomorrow than we were today. So keep that in mind. And what's your 1%?